them to come together and talk about what can be done in this season. I'm asking you to come together because as trying a time as it is, and as difficult a time as it is, I really don't believe that this is a time of failure and collapse. I really believe that this is a time of opportunity. And this is a time when we're going to be able to go forward. We've got the chat rooms open for you to ask questions. And I want you to ask questions throughout this. I want you to push us, push our panel. I'm going to introduce some of them in a moment and share with you who they are and let them start answering some questions and helping us to get ready, because I know many of you are concerned and feeling the pinch and worried. How am I going to make it? How am I going to go forward? How are we going to handle this? But I've got to stress to you, this is going to be a doable environment. The term that I am using, that the Lord gave me this term to use for what we are facing. We are facing now, not the normal economy that we know. We are facing what I call a pandemic economy. And I'd like you to start thinking of it that way, a pandemic economy. And in a pandemic economy, or the pandemic economy is operating side by side or within the larger economy that we all think about. But the problem is, we've only been thinking about the larger economy that is under stress and strain right now. We have not been thinking about the pandemic economy that is exploding right in front of us. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. And hopefully, when you finish this Zoom tonight, you will have ideas. Not only will you have ideas, you will be inspired. Not only will you be inspired, you will make things happen. This is the first of many conversations like this, conversations you'll have with us, conversations you'll have with each other, and conversations that will grow out of this conversation. We're not going to fix everything tonight, but we are going to start to put people on the right road. We are going to start to put people in the path that they need to travel. So Reverend Josh, I think we're ready to begin. Is that right?
Yes, we are ready to begin. And right before Bishop introduces everyone that's on our panel tonight, I want to give you some housekeeping and ground rules. In the chat room, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions right under the Q&A tab. So throughout the presentation tonight, as our different panelists are presenting and the dialogue is going forward, if you do have questions, feel free to write your questions right in under the Q&A. Our team is on. We will do our best to get as many, if not all of the questions asked to our panel tonight. And also, if there are other questions or conversation or comments, you can share those right in the chat, and all of our participants, as well as all of the attendees, will be able to see those and ask and have a dialogue going in the chat as well. And so Bishop, now we can go ahead. Bishop's going to go ahead now and introduce our panelists for the evening.
Let me start by introducing our first two panelists, Sandra Workman and Rhonda Brunson. Sandra's been with Harbor Bank for a good many years now. She's been working with the SBA and working with SBA loans and helping persons get through a very difficult process, the SBA, Small Business Administration. But not all small business owners have loans with and do operations in the Small Business Administration. But there is a new law out that is intended to help small businesses. It's called the CARES Act. She's going to talk about that in a little bit. But let me explain what I think the CARES Act principally tries to do, or one of the things it tries to do. Many persons are being laid off, and many people have had to lay off employees. And the reason for that is labor costs are very high. So what government intended to do was to try to make labor or to make employees less expensive. And so they came up with the CARES Act and the pieces that are payroll protection and other things. So Sandra, today I'd like you to help those who are sharing with us understand what the CARES Act is and how it can benefit them.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and just before you start, I'd like people to just drop in where they're from in the chat. Let us know where you're from, where you're coming from, you know, what part of the city, as people are going to go right on, Sam.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And you sort of summed up the program in a couple of seconds. It's exactly what it is. And so for those small business owners, basically, this is an 8-week Band-Aid. So what the government has done, in the addition to that 2 trillion, you may be familiar with that $2 trillion stimulus package that came out. Well, 349 billion of that was sent directly to our way, asking banks to fund those small businesses who recently had to shut their doors and send their folks home. And so the idea of this was to let's try to keep folks on payroll. Now, if the business owner does that with the funds, then the funds would be forgiven. Now, many people say, I've had some, we've gotten the response to this has been just overwhelming. And so as you reach out to the institutions, I ask that you be patient with them, but what you're gonna find is a lot of institutions have just said, well, I'm only gonna service my own customers. And so what I'm getting now is feedback from the government saying, we're running into this. And so they've just put out a message to all the banks and said, let us know those institutions that are willing to work with non-customers. And we're doing that. And so they'll be able to direct you. But the important thing to remember here again, this is for the employer. It will pay 2.5 times his payroll. It is simply meant to be a Band-Aid to keep his folks on payroll. So what happens after this 8 weeks? We're hoping for another package, but that's what this package is right now. So it's first come, first serve. And so you get it. And so that's creating some of the panic with the businesses because they're not hearing fast enough. Sort of the light switch was turned on the 3rd, where everybody could apply except those 1099 and contractors. You can't apply until the 10th. And so the fear is the money going to be gone? Where am I? And so we've got a lot of room. I don't have the exact number, but I think day 1, it was about $7 billion used. Day 2 is about 22. And again, we're going to 349 billion. So right now there's money there. What you may run into is who's going to take my application and what is it that I have to do? The challenge is that most institutions are, first of all, I'll back up to say Harbor Bank is one of the banks that are accepting applications for both customers and non-customers. So at least in the interim, we're trying to help as much of the community as we can. That's this week and next week. You know, some of the banks started out and some has just, you know, decided this week that they're going to stop. So basically the employers that are eligible for this, it's most employers, because the number one thing we're looking at is anybody under 500 employees. So that's pretty much.
Does that mean if I have a business and I am the only employee of my business?
Well, that's a very good question. I haven't run into that, and we can create after this a way to follow up with questions, but I'm going to guess no, no. And only because when I'm thinking about the intent, because the whole intent is to keep your folks on payroll. The fear was, because I had one business owner that called me and he understood exactly. He says, I'm not going to apply because the way I see this is not a grant. This doesn't help me. Why should I do it? And I said, you know, this is again intended to keep your employees. You know, he said, well, my doors are shut and they're home. And so it's not just for the restaurant. You have to think of some of the businesses, the biggest challenge they have is retaining good people. And so for that doctor or that CPA or even a chef, a restaurant that has a chef, if you leave them out of work for 8 weeks, not only is it going to put stress on the system because he can't pay his mortgage and he can't pay some of the other bills, but then when this period is over, you may have lost him. And so that puts the business at a deficit. So again, this is just to keep, so that's the long answer to you, the business owner, you're not going to go anywhere. So the intent of the bill is to keep that payroll. And the good news is this will fund up to $10 million. So the first week we've done about 25, I've done about 25 applications over the last 2 days, and they've ranged anywhere from 15,000 to $2 million. So again, the intent is employees, not 1099, not contractors. Those folks can fly under something different, but employers, small businesses with 500 or less employees.
Let me push the next question in the same area.
Sure.
So some businesses, some of the business owners say, like I'm looking at somebody who's a bookkeeping, who has a bookkeeping business, and say they have maybe 2 other employees or 1 other employee other than themselves, and they're all W-2 employees, not 1099, even though the person may own the business, a small business, but they're a W-2 employee. They get a W-2 at the end of the year.
Yes.
But also, can you talk about the emergency expense injury grant, the emergency economic injury grant that some businesses can also get for $10,000?
Right. So I'm not really familiar. In that bill, there's a couple of, you have that, and then you also have the disaster loan.
Right.
And then you have this one, which is the PPP, which is the payroll protection. I only focus on the payroll protection because the disasters are funded directly from the government. They don't necessarily need us. And so unfortunately, it's sort of the arena that we're playing in is this PPP. I don't have a lot of information or the specifics on the other 2 programs, other than the websites you'd go to apply for those disasters. But the PPP are the ones that the banks are charged with delivering, and that's the only way to get that $349 billion is through the banks. And that seems to be the disasters obviously is going to benefit the business. The PPP is simply about paying your people.
Okay. Then let me share this with the rest of those who are on the Zoom with us. Be sure to look up the CARES Act and the various financial remedies that exist. There is the disaster part. There is the emergency economic injury grant, which your company may apply for and you may qualify for. And a grant means you don't have to pay it back. With the payroll protection plan, there are some things done on the back end that you have to be careful of so that you don't have to pay that back either. But you can go online, you can go to the banks, you can go to the Treasury Department, the US Treasury Department, and you can find all of these. But terms like PPP, Payroll Protection Plan, under what's called CARES, CARES, all caps, Act. Then there is the EEIG, the Emergency Economic Injury Grant. And there is the Emergency Disaster Loan.
So Bishop, if I could jump in, so I could talk about those 2 to help you out on that. In order to get the grant, you will apply for what they're describing as EIDL, as you described it, the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan. When you apply for that loan, it asks you if you would like to also apply for an advance on that loan, which then, once you've done it and you've received your loan, it becomes a grant. It's a forgivable portion to your loan. That is a standard program of SBA, but they've modified it slightly for this type of a disaster. And in that one, as Sandra explained, that money comes directly from SBA. There are no banks involved.
That's directly SBA. Sandra, let me go back to you. If you have new hires, how does hiring people now affect this, or does it?
Right. So I'll give you the guidelines, and then I'll tell you what we're doing at our bank. But before I do that, I want to make it clear too. I'm glad you gave the audience all of the options under the CARES Act. but you want to understand each one because you can only apply for one. So a person that goes for the disaster can't apply for the PPP. So you want to know which one benefits you. They're not letting you double dip in this instance. Okay. In terms of, ideally we want businesses, well, the business has to have been in place before February 15th. And ideally we want business that's had a full 12-month cycle, because it's easy for us to make the certifications that we had to make. And plus you pay payroll taxes, and we have the backup that we can use that as the backup in the certification. Now, obviously, if you haven't had a full 12-month cycle, or your seasonal business, there are some allowances that can be made, and the program does allow for it. It's just not as clean as those businesses who's had a full 12-month cycle. But they're not excluded if you haven't had a full 12-month cycle.
Any questions, Joshua, or that are coming in?
So a few of our participants and attendees in the chat room are stating that many of them do have businesses that have 1 or 2 employees, and some are asking if they can hire new employees now with the funds that they receive.
No, those employees would have had to be in place. And so for the person who has 2 employees, and even if one of those employees is the owner, that's okay. But what we're doing is, if the owner is paying himself more than 100,000, we're capping it at 100. Okay, so just to sort of give you an easy an example, if I've got 3 employees and all 3 of them make 100,000, then the formula we're using is saying, okay, you have 300,000 divided by 12, and then I multiply that times 2.5, and that's what I give you in terms of to pay your payroll. Now, if you have that same 300, but one person makes 150, we are limiting that to 100. The government is maxing the salary that we're giving you at $100,000. So for that reason, one of the things the banks we're asking you for is, we need a summary of your payroll. Well, it's and that's becoming challenging, because if you got 10, 15 employees, it's pretty easy to do. Here's 10 employees, here's the list, here's what they make a year. I can see nobody makes more than 100,000, or if they do, I can just limit that salary at 100,000. When you have 500 employees, it gets a little more challenging. But just sort of know that, yes, you can include the owner, but we're going to max it at $100,000.
And for those of you, and Sandra, you can correct me if I'm wrong, for those of you who have other benefits that you give to your employees, like health insurance, 401k, or whatever, if those things are a part of your employee package, they can be added into the amount of, or to the cost of your employees. And that number is also included in there.
Absolutely, that's absolutely correct. So the payroll cost, it not only includes salary, wages, commission, it's payment of cash and tips or equivalent, which is interesting. There's a formula for that. Vacation, sick time. There's allowance for group health care benefits, insurance premiums, retirement benefits. So we recognize that all of those things are associated with paying your folks, not just the paycheck that they're receiving, and all of that is eligible and wrapping it up. Now, where the bishop talked about it could end up being a loan, here's where you have to be careful. And here at the Harbor Bank, we're doing this for people. The government says that I'm giving you 2.5 times your payroll. You can use it to pay your folks, but you can also use it to pay utilities, pay your leases, pay some of your mortgage interest. There's a lot of confusion about that. And so you can do that. But if at the end of the day, we do the calculation and find out you spent more than 25% that wasn't against payroll, you've just gotten yourself a loan from the government opposed to a grant. So when I get the calculations from you, I want to make sure I understand what you're looking to pay and give you that sort of number that's the fluff. Because again, if it turns out to be just 26%, that 1% is not going to be a grant, it's going to be a loan. So there's going to be a lot of work with follow up with this because we're funding within 10 days. They gave us some leeway. At first it was 5 days. So I get the application, then today I can get a loan number today, and I have to fund you within 10 days. And then all of the banks are going to have to come back to you and say, now show me evidence that you actually paid payroll and that you didn't let somebody go and you didn't pay it all on something else. Once you do that, then your loan can be forgiven. The bank will work with the government, forgiven, and you have a grant. But if I gave you, there again, a $500,000, and then we come back and we look at it and we see less than 75% of that went to payroll, there's going to be a portion of that that's not going to be forgiven. And it's going to be a loan at 1% due in 2 years, which could really hurt the cash flow in the business when we've done some numbers, and 2-year amortization can be a pretty steep payment. So the key is stay away from paying other than payroll. And if you do, stay within that 25% period, because somebody's going to come back and ask you for that before you're forgiven.
The key for everybody listening is if you have a business, in the sense of, and Sandra, you correct me if I'm wrong, that has a ID number, a government ID number, you have a tax number, so that you are paying taxes, you exist as a business. This is something for you to look at.
Yes.
Regardless of how big or small your business is. You say, well, it's just me, I'm a contractor. Look at it anyhow, because once you start looking, you will be looking, whoever you're working with will help you look at the other things that also are available to see if any of these fit for you. This is a Band-Aid, but sometimes you need a Band-Aid to keep dirt from getting into the wound.
Right.
Let me go to
Bishop.
Yes.
One other point, and Sandra, if you could share a little bit more is regarding the businesses. Many of our attendees in the chat room have different businesses. Some have LLC, some are sole proprietors. Is there a specific business setup or a business design that you have to be eligible for this loan?
Sure, that's a great question, because I'm really pleased that the SBA has expanded who's eligible, because normally nonprofits are not eligible for SBA funding. In this case, they opened it up to nonprofits, so it's great. So in their words, an eligible business is a small business with 500 or fewer employees, including nonprofits, veteran organization, tribal concerns, self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, independent contracts, all businesses with more than 500. So as long as they're under 500 employees. Then they even went further to make some allowances for people over 500. So if you have over 500, for the hotel owners out there, there's a little bit of wiggle room. We have to do something different, but most 99% of the folks are going to fall under this. And so it pretty much excludes no one. When this round, it included nonprofits. So we've always been able to fund to every type of corporation, LLC, it didn't matter, sole proprietors, it didn't matter, as long as it was a business. But now we can do nonprofits also. So, but the thing to remember is if you are a contractor, or individual contractor, you can apply to the 10th. I don't know why they decided to do that. So for instance, I had a business that sent me for the 2.5 times of his payroll. He owns a gym. Well, all of his employees are 1099 contractors. So he can't claim their payroll. They have to claim it as a contractor. That's the only difference. So that's one of the few types of industries that may be affected by that. It can't be your 1099 contractor workers. They're going to do it on their own on the 10th.
Let me ask this just to be sure. And credit is not an issue for getting this loan. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And that's the other thing. It's getting the money in the hands of the business owners fast. We are not running credit. It does not require any collateral. It is 100% guaranteed by the SBA. I've been in banking over 30 years. It is the first product they put out, no personal guarantees. You don't even guarantee the loan. So it is 100% based on your payroll records and paying you 2.5 times your payroll. And all you have to do is pay your people and not let them go during that 8-week period. That's all you have to do.
and they want a paycheck.
And
Believe
they
me.
want, there you go. Yes.
Let me jump over, if it's okay, Joshua. Let me jump over and introduce Rhonda Brunson. Rhonda's been working with credit, helping people clean up their credit, helping businesses get credit. She has helped more persons than I can even think of to get their businesses started, to get their finances in order, and to have their dreams come true. Because in this American economy, it takes credit to make stuff happen. And in order to get credit, you have to show yourself credit worthy. Now, many persons are afraid, Rhonda, during this season, that all of the credit cachet that they have built up is going to be lost.
Mm-hmm.
Some are afraid that they are going to lose everything in the process, and are not sure what their steps should be to maintain the kind of good credit rating they have, and to even use it to make things happen. Sandra talked about what they can do for their companies, but some of them are wondering what's going to happen to because their personal stuff is tied up with their credit. Ron?
Yeah, absolutely, Bishop. Unfortunately, credit does run the world, and we have to do our due diligence to protect it. What I suggest that everyone do is create a spreadsheet of the bills that they know that they owe on a monthly basis, and separate those that report to the credit bureaus versus those like your utility bills that don't report, and make contact with those creditors. The issue is, number one, a lot of people suffer even pre-pandemic from anxiety as it relates to speaking to creditors or collection agencies. When it comes to calling, they don't want to initiate communication. When they call, they don't want to answer the phone. So it's getting over that anxiety and then applying patience. The hold times are absolutely ridiculous. I was trying to hold for myself for my auto loan, which is with Capital One. Their hold time was so long, they just hung up on you. And so what happened was people started complaining on their Facebook page. So at first, what I did, because it was a week and I still couldn't make contact, I filed a complaint against them with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then I went to Facebook where I saw that everybody was complaining, and I made my comment as well. And someone replied to me the same day on Facebook. So you're going to have to get creative with how you reach out to your creditors, because they too were not prepared for anything like this.
That's interesting. So in essence, you decided not to be afraid to tackle it.
Absolutely not. I'm not afraid of anything.
Talk to some of our persons who are afraid. Their credit may not be great, or they are intimidated. Can you talk to some of them?
Well, my experience really laid in comes from the collection section of credit. I did collection for years, and I knew that I could be intimidating. So when it came to talking to collectors on this side, it wasn't a big deal. I like to remind people that everyone you speak to puts their pants on one leg at a time, just like you. And there are regulations in place that keep them from disrespecting you. So if you feel like you've been verbally assaulted or abused, we can file a complaint about that too.
Really?
Absolutely.
Well, then, are there some things that you would say outside of making the phone calls? Mm-hmm. Are there some other things that our small business owners, because many of them they are not some of them are part-time in their business.
Correct.
Some of them are full-time in their small business. Mm-hmm. Are there any things you would say to them that they must be very mindful to do right now?
Most important thing is going to be to create a paper trail. So for our small business owners that have rent for their actual space, or even rent for their homes that they're unable to pay, as you negotiate your way through these things, put it in writing. So if I'm negotiating my rent, I'm going to verbally speak to the person at the rental office, but then I'm going to follow up with an email that says, thank you so much for speaking with me today. We agreed, and we'll have it in writing as a paper trail so that later on the other side of this, I won't get any feedback saying we never heard from you. You absolutely did.
Let me ask Sandra a question too in this area. Sandra, this is about the PPE, about the payroll thing. Can you apply for less than your payroll?
You absolutely can apply for less, absolutely. But when you think about it, it's a grant forgiven. You know, most people are not, because they're looking at it as free money. I want to comment too, the young lady that came before me and talking about your existing bills. It prompted me to remember something. If any of your listeners have existing SBA loans, SBA is making those payments for you for the next 6 months. So if you haven't heard from your lender, talk to your lender. We've gotten, it's very new, but they gave us notes. They sent us notice and said, banks, we're going to make those payments for you. So anybody who makes a payment after March 27th, you're to send their money back to them, and we're going to take care of you. So while the banks we're still waiting for how the SBA is going to sort of execute that, it's good for your listeners to know you're going to get relief, what you already owe them for the next 6 months.
So let's think for a second about what we're hearing. We're hearing, I want you to imagine the weight of this economic collapse on your shoulders. You're hearing that one of the things that's happening is one of your big costs, payroll costs, is being lifted up off your shoulders for the next 8 weeks. You're hearing that payments that if you have an SBA loan are being lifted up off your shoulders. Now, I need the whole panel maybe to jump in on this next one I'm going to say, especially Scott, and if you know for sure on this. In the state of Maryland, they are not going to be doing foreclosures and evictions for the next several months. So that, I want you to just imagine this big weight that has pushed you down, and you don't see how in the world you're going to function, and start seeing the different ways that this weight is being lifted. Is there anyone, I think it's evictions are not going to be done. Foreclosures, is that right, Scott?
That is correct. So and it's been expanded, not just residential, but also commercial evictions will not be done. Foreclosures are stayed. There'll be no foreclosures at the time. There's another reality. The court system is at a snail's pace right now, and is only dealing with relatively urgent matters. So folks can feel comfortable in their homes and in their businesses for the foreseeable future.
The gas and electric is not turning you off during this. Telephone cell service is not going to be turned off during this period. And if I'm not mistaken, water bills will not be turned off. Water service will not be turned off. I want you to imagine that you come to this session tonight with all of these weights. And part of our intent is to inform you of the ones that are being lifted some, so that you can function with what's left. Rhonda's been talking about how with what you're left, you can function and turn and maneuver. You don't have to sit at home saying, I'm going to lose everything. Because in these next eight weeks, you have the opportunity to plan some things. Before I shift to Scott and to Jimmy and to Diana, Rhonda, I need you to talk about for a second, people who didn't see the possibility of making a dream happen, because we're back at that stage now. You know, folk are in an environment where they don't see how I can go forward. I need you to talk about things you had to say to people to help them dream.
Well, if anyone follows me on social media, I make a lot of encouraging videos. I try to shift people's energy so that we can focus on the positives. We can either sit here and sulk about everything that's wrong, or create some new adventures and avenues of business that makes it right. It doesn't mean, I think it's really a time for us to become creative in what we do. Things like Zoom church, Zoom choir, it's ways that you can continue your business. It just causes you to shift your mindset. You have to really expand your thinking. So even in business owners, to me, are the best dreamers you'll ever meet. because we always have to constantly be churning. Our minds are always going about what can we do different? How can we make a difference? What other stream of income do we want to add to our business? None of that energy has to change in this moment. This is the second recession that my business has weathered. We're still doing really good. It's all about the energy that you put into your work. So you can either be sad and depressed and crawl under a rock, or you can just attack it and say, this is it. I got to figure out how or where I go from here.
So imagine the weights are being lifted. God has created an environment where the weights are being pushed up, but you can't stop dreaming. You can't stop dreaming. You cannot wallow in despair. You cannot do that. Sandra, we'll come back to you, but there's a question, Glenda and Eric, there's a question from Cassandra about home mortgages, people whose business are in their homes, and about using part of the funds for home mortgage. So if you can dress that up to hit Sandra a little later. I want to jump over to Diana, Scott, and to Jimmy, because now we want to talk about, we've tried to lift some of this weight off your shoulder. We've tried to pick it up. And one of the things we've got to understand now is how to dream forward. But before I go there, I've got to say this one thing. Many people got insurance for their business. And I need Diana to just address this. Diana, many people are thinking and wondering, does business interruption insurance help me here?
No, it does not.
I need you to speak to that.
No, it does not, because the unfortunate thing is we've never had this type of situation ever happen. Act of God that is not covered by any type of carrier in the United States at all, ever, because of the fact that we've never had it. And I did my research on it with quite a few very large carriers to make sure there wasn't at least one that was willing to take on the task of insuring someone who had gone and had business interruption. In the business interruption or business income policy, there is a section called civil authority, and it also has in there disease and virus, which is excluded under business interruption. If you have a fire, if you have windstorm, wind, hail, damage, all of those things would be covered, but not for viruses or diseases. So it would never be covered anywhere. Now, moving forward, the carriers are having discussions as we speak about what can we do, because remember when we had the earthquakes and we never thought we'd have them in our area because we're in the East Coast, but we had them. So what I did was, as an agent, every one of my clients ended up with earthquake coverage. They probably will never use it. It wasn't that expensive, so they have purchased it. It's the same thing here. As soon as they have the red light to go and have found the right rates for it, I will be one of the first ones to put it out there on the market and share it with my clients.
Let me ask you this. Given this kind of environment, many of our people have had to shutter their shops. And I would like you to just say something about what kind of insurance small business owners who are not working, and some of the people on the panel who might want to jump in to correct what I say, add to it, who may be working or may not be working from home, but may have shops out somewhere, or suite here or suite there, or working in a incubator or whatever, but they've been shuttered. The doors have been shut. What kind of insurance going from now do people need to have, do small business owners need to have?
Small business owners need to cover their equipment, whether they got $5,000 or $50,000 worth of equipment, it needs to be covered. Someone steals it, it gets destroyed. They need coverage for that. They need coverage for liability. It's called commercial general liability coverage. They need to have those two things.
What is the downside of not having the liability? And let's take an industry, barbershop, or hairdresser, or a nail salon, a esthetician, a caterer. What's the downside?
Having no liability insurance is to cause them to not be able to get certain jobs because they require them at a hotel and other places that they show evidence that they have general liability coverage. Also, if someone tries to sue them for something that happens and they don't have liability coverage, they're going to have to run off to their attorney and hopefully have enough money saved up or somewhere to pay for attorney fees. Whereas they have the insurance is going to walk in for them and take care of things because they have attorneys for that. That's one of the reasons that you purchase insurance, for protection.
So one of the costs that a small business owner must consider upon opening and even reopening after this time is some form of insurance.
Yes. Now, for me, I work with clients to make sure that they have what they need. I'm not trying to break the bank on them. I want them to be protected properly. So we're not going to give them minimum limits because there's no such thing as that anymore. You're going to have $1 million in liability. Nobody wants to insure you for 500,000 or less. It's got to be $1 million because of the tort society that we live in. But as far as what I would recommend for a small business, you got to insure your property and you have to have liability insurance. If you have employees that you're paid with taxes taken out, you need to have insurance for them as well. If you have a vehicle that's titled in the name of the business, you need to have insurance for that vehicle, what we call commercial insurance. Like Progressive sometimes does the commercials on that. So we would put you, those are the things that the questions that I ask. Do you have employees? What type of business are you? Are you doing it from home? Are you leasing from someone? You've got to show your landlord that you have insurance. They want to see evidence that you have liability insurance for your business.
Because if somebody falls in there, they can be pulled in.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what we do is we give them a certificate that shows them as additional insured to protect them as well.
Now,
so we show on that certificate the name of the business, all of the limits and all the information for insurance. And then it'll also say who's the certificate holder, who would be the landlord. So that's where they would be protected and it would say they're additional insured as well.
one of the things I'd recommend is that all of our business owners take a listen to what we're saying tonight. Some of this is directly applicable to the environment in which we find ourselves. Some of it is applicable to just being in business.
Yes.
And so as we broaden this, and one thing we'll go back to, and I'll get to probably Scott on this a little later. Some of our people are landlords of small business and they're collecting money, rent from other persons who now can't pay the rent, which means they can't pay the mortgage. We'll talk about that a little later. And Sandra, if you would remind us of what banks are doing when I get back to that one. But let me go a little further. Let me go a little further. Because I've said to you, this is a pandemic, or that's what it's described as. But I've affixed pandemic to the noun economy, that we are living in a pandemic economy. We are surrounded by it. And I don't think we're really understanding what opportunity is existing for us. The wider economy, we've watched the Dow Jones fall, the S&P and the stock market fall. People with 401ks have watched their numbers go down. Businesses have shuttered their doors. Employees are home and furloughed. Unemployment rate higher than ever before. And people are in despair and anxious. But here's my question. Is business being done? The answer is absolutely yes. There is a pandemic economy that is alive and well that's going on right around us. The government's been building installations all around to take care of hospital needs. That means low fiber cable is being, or low voltage cable is being run so that systems can be put up. Nurses equipment, or rather PPE, personal protection equipment, is at an all-time shortage. There is an excess demand and a limited supply of just about everything that is needed in the medical field. And everything that is, people have been sheltered in their homes for 2 to 3 weeks. And the line is that we will probably be in our houses till around May or June. And then there may be another round of this coming up in October. If we only think of the wider economy that we've struggled in, then we're missing the opportunity that the pandemic economy is creating for us. I hope you're hearing what I'm saying and beginning to understand what I'm saying. For example, and I just throw this out as an example, then I'm going to throw it to Jimmy. Jimmy Britton is on with us tonight. Jimmy Britton is the owner of Class Act Catering. And everybody knows Jimmy's food is the best in the world. You know, I think I'm the #1 spokesman for it. Hey, for Class Act Catering. But here's the interesting thing. Nobody's having a banquet now. Nobody's having an event. Nobody's doing anything. Scott Phillips is on with us. Scott is a lawyer. He wears many hats, but most of which is in helping folk understand where your next move is, what your next shift is. And he's worked with manufacturers and others to help them understand where they're going. You've heard Diana talking. Diana had to come to her business that same way with a dream focus. Rhonda, the same way, came to her business with a dream focus. I want you to hear from them their sense of how you don't stay stuck in this age, how there's an opportunity. I'm going to throw out just something. Markets are about, business is really about what we call markets. And a market is nothing more than a buyer and a seller. That's all a market is, a buyer meeting up with a seller. And here is the question we need to be asking now. After you finish crying, this is Thomas Axiom 63. God gives you 24 hours to cry over whatever it is that's happening in your life. God gives you 24 hours to cry over. After that, get up and get back to work. 24 hours is all you get. Crawl up in the bed in the fetal position, look sad, do the ugly face. But after that, get back to work. And now we've had our 24 hours. Now the question for us is, what is it that I offer or that I have the ability to bring to bear that this market needs, that somebody is looking for? Let me just give you an example. It's a limited one, and I don't even advocate you do it, I'm just saying it. You're a beautician. You have a salon. Well, they declared you're not essential. I know a lot of women who would go to war on that issue, that a beautician and a hair salon is not essential. They would say that's a lie. But they're not allowing you to open your shop. Does that mean women don't need their hair done? Some women have been coming to you for years. They haven't touched their hair in years. They call you for every suggestion for their hair. Somebody better hear me. They even come in with magazines. I want to look like her. And they've got it together. They ain't doing no hair. You have to say to them sometime, your hair is breaking off. You need to give more attention to your hair. Some of y'all know I'm right. You know, I'm in my groove right now. Do you think those women are washing their hair right now? Do you think they are greasing their scalp good right now? You better wake up and smell the coffee. No, they're not. They're crying for you to be open. Now, my question to you is, what service can you provide your clientele and monetize it? How can you monetize it? I'm just going to throw this out. You could be doing classes just like we're doing right now, how to roll your hair at night, how to set it, and sell your products. You could call whoever you get your products from and say, I'm going to sell them, but I want a commission. I want a bigger commission on all the products that I'm selling. If I sell X number of this, I want this. You could be on with different stuff, with different this. This is the product I think you need for those of you who have such and such. And build a bigger audience than ever you could do hair in your shop. But what does that mean? That means I got to think about who are my new clients, or who are my clients and what do they need now that I can provide? Let me throw to Jimmy. Jimmy's a caterer. Jimmy, talk about some stuff.
So, Bishop, when we got the news that all of our contracts were closed down and majority of off-premise catering at locations and colleges and institutions that we've held down for 20 years, I could have sat around as Rhonda said and cried and boo-hooed, but instead I started reaching out to some of my contacts and some of my close relatives and friends and finding ways that we could do a new type of business, a delivery business, a service that I had never thought about because we were not essential at that point. So I just had to reinvent and think of some out of the box ways to draw some new income and get my people back to work.
Because in the pandemic economy, there's still buyers. They're still buyers. And the question is, what do I sell that they're looking for? Jimmy, tell them what you came up with, what idea you came up with.
So this is Easter Sunday, and people can't get out to restaurants, and they generally have between 4 to 6 to 8 people in their homes. We came up with a curbside to go menu from Class Act Catering, featuring some of our world famous crab cakes, some of our delicious salmon, some of the best fried chicken you ever had. And we put it into an affordable package, and you would be amazed at the outpour of support we got just on name recognition and relationships. Or I could have sat at home and complained and did nothing. Thanks be to God, I listened to one of my close friends, and we did some social media. We got together with Mr. Phillips, who's on the other line, and he gave us some advice as to, you know, what we should move forward in doing. And today we got over 200 orders.
Now, Easter hasn't even got here yet, has it? You're not even at the end of the week, and you just started this yesterday, right?
Started it actually yesterday evening. We rolled it out yesterday evening, and within 24 hours, we placed over 200 orders.
Now, talk about how you did goal setting. Goal setting, how you said, what kind of goal am I going to set for this?
Well, I set a goal to make $30,000. And I did the formulas and figured out how many people I needed to buy that many meals from me. And by 5 o'clock this afternoon, we had done about a quarter of the way, and the phones are ringing off. I put all my staff to work, said, if you don't come to work or you don't take these phones, don't come back to work. But we set a goal to make certain that we could do at least $30,000. And I believe by what God has already shown me that we're going to reach that goal.
All right. Scott Phillips has done so much. Scott, jump in at this point and talk about other things, how people can begin to dream and vision.
So Bishop, one of the things that I'm a basketball player at heart, right? I've had to I had to retire all of that. But one of the greatest moves in basketball is the pivot, right? It's an essential move in basketball. And the pivot just means I've got to change direction and I've got to adapt to what's in front of me. There's a good friend of mine who I admire greatly. He's written a lot about what they call pivot point intelligence. Dr. Bob Wallace.
Yes.
And when he talks about that, what he's saying is you've got to look at your environment. You've got to take the skills that you have and figure out how I can apply them, as you call it, in this new pandemic economy. So I've had some clients that I've talked to that are doing a number of things. One is involved in telecommunications. And what he's found is his business has actually increased. So think about what's happening. Most people are at home. They're using their broadband, their Wi-Fi, and that's increasing the need for folks in that field. In this last 2.5 weeks, he's kind of going through so much in terms of demand that he's got to figure out how to train folks. So he's already thinking about setting up a school to train people in that field, right? And so we're working through that process because that's an opportunity that's presented itself in this pandemic economy. If you think about all the folks, we've got a guy who's doing clothing, manufacturing clothing. He is well positioned, as you call it, PPE, to start doing, and he has started doing gowns and masks and things of that nature, and selling them to Hopkins and the University of Maryland Medical System. So there are opportunities in this. I think about transportation. We're now getting everything delivered to us, right? Well, who is doing that? The same people that were driving people, the Uber drivers. There's opportunities out there with solutions, apps like Shipt, where you go out, you do the shopping for other people, you drive it and you deliver it to their homes. So it's another option, another way to think about how we approach this. At the same time, we talk about the shift and this pivot. This is the time to think about what things are going to look like when we get on the other side. And I'm saying to folks, for those who haven't figured out how to apply their skill sets to make money in this economy, as we shift, what are the changes that you need to make today, right? Is it improving your telework environment for your employees? Well, you need to start doing that today, because this thing isn't going away. We're going to be living with this much longer than 2 months. While we may get back to some sense of normal, some of these things are going to hang on well beyond 2 months from now. And so we just need to adjust, adapt, and be prepared to modify how we do business.
Because listen, this is not the last time we're going to see something like this. Something else is going to come, and we need to be in position. You know, as Scott was talking about the various industries that are, or the various opportunities that exist. I know a lot of photographers now don't have any weddings to take pictures for, or have events to take pictures for. Does that mean the camera is done? Absolutely not. And here's an interesting thing. People are still buying homes. I mean, somebody missed that. Folk are still buying homes. You say buying homes, how are they doing it? Well, this is where photographers come in. People can't go to the homes to go see the homes like they used to. And so real estate agents and realtors are hiring photographers to go do photo shoots of homes. So you may not be doing a wedding, you're doing a house, you're doing a business, you're doing commercial properties, you're hooking up with a realtor and doing all of their business. You're hooking up with a commercial property and doing all of their business. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to say, there is a market out here and I have something to sell that I have perfected, or there is something I'm going to learn is needed and I'm going to perfect the supply of it. Rhonda, can you jump in and talk about some things at this point that you've seen and you're doing?
Absolutely. So up until about 2 weeks ago, the minimum FHA requirement, if you had assets, which means you had some cash, was 580. Within 2 weeks, the score requirement for FHA is now 660, 680. The interest rate 2 weeks ago was 2.8%. As of today, it's 4.8%. Lenders are afraid to lend, if you will. Think about it through HUD and other services. They've allowed deferments and forbearances to take place. So nobody's going to get paid in mortgage land. Yet they want to be able to extend more money out that they can't even guarantee at this time they're going to get back. So it's a really, it's a risky market. Never in life has a credit score approved anybody for anything. It's always the behavior that we see in the report. Now that is even more true. We need to see good behavior in the report and stronger financials in order for a person to be able to qualify.
So I'm encouraging each and every person to start believing and seeing opportunity, and also saying, this is a time for me to clean my act up. This is not a time for me to get flaky. This is time for me to hold and clean my act up, make sure I've got all my ducks in order for what I want to do, so that I can swim through this and launch on the other side. I got to get through this, so there's certain things I got to make sure I keep intact, but I want to be able to launch when I get to the other side. This is a time for reading. This is a time for conversations, and this is not the time to hanker down in your own little silo and not ask questions. This is the time to ask questions everywhere you go. Reverend Josh, are there any questions that we have jumping in?
And so in the chat room, we have a few different threads going right now as we continue going through. If you have a business that does offer products online or has some of these services that we're talking about, please feel free to share the information in the chat so that others who are on here may also be able to benefit from the services that you have. But one question that has come up from one of our participants, they stated that they applied for a disaster loan, the $10,000 loan, then applied for the PPP, and the PPP enabled them to add $10,000 onto the loan. Wanted to get some clarity, and as we could talk it through as a panel, if these different loans can work together, and if not, should there be a certain threshold that persons look forward to see which one works best for them?
Sandra?
Yeah, so you don't want to apply for both at the same time. The benefits of I encourage you, you're going to have to go on the website of the disaster, talk to the folks that are offering disaster loans, and perhaps your accountant, and figure out which is best for you. But we don't encourage you to apply for both at the same time. It's one or the other.
Sandra raised a great point, Doctor. You mentioned it to me earlier about a team. God has blessed New Psalmists to allow us to do what we do right now and to share with you and to be able to have this conversation. But I need to help you understand something about New Psalmists. New Psalmists is not a one-man show. New Psalmists, God used New Psalmists to get to where it is, but God formed a team that helps us accomplish what we accomplish and get to where we accomplish. When I went to New Psalmists, we had 200 members living and dead in a building that was so small. We were only known by the food market that was next door to the church. Nobody knew New Psalmists. They just knew City Food Market that was right next door. But God grew us to where we are now, and folk know the name New Psalmists. In 1982, I went to a dinner, and I sat beside Elijah Cummings, and we became friends. And he joined New Psalmist Church, and he became the attorney for New Psalmist Baptist Church, the first member of my team. Now, we were both same age, just about. Elijah was a couple of years younger than me. But we were members of the same church, same age group, both of us fledgling in our industry. I'm a young pastor, he's a young lawyer. But that's the first member of my team. We had an issue with payroll that we didn't know how to resolve. And Elijah Cummings said to me, there's a young accountant who's just opened a firm that I know, and I think he can help you. He was young, I was young, Elijah was young. That's one thing bad about this, both of them were from City College. Arnold Williams was his name, but I know Polytechnic can hold its own. And I was from Poly, so I went to Arnold Williams, and Arnold Williams became the second person of our team. Second person in our team. Then from that, we started to build and do other things at church. I was fine with 2 members, but then we needed to buy some property. My brother happens to be a MAI appraiser for property and a partner at an appraisal firm. So he's not a member of New Psalmists. Neither are Arnold, but Elijah was. I brought him in to help us understand valuations of property. Then we brought in Emerson Dorsey to understand the wider dimensions of real estate law. Then Anthony Vaughn and Alan Price to understand and talk us through construction. To the point that we have a round table that sits and helps us decide and understand what we need to do and what we need to do next. Now, that didn't start when I got to be 50. That didn't start when I got to be 60. It started when I was 30 something. And what I'm saying to you is every person needs to have a team. It doesn't have to be formally structured, but you need to have a team. The Bible says in the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom. You need to be able to go to this lawyer or to this accountant and talk this stuff over that we're talking tonight. When New Psalmist was on North Avenue in Druid Hill, I went to Gregory Williams, who graduated from University of Maryland with me. And he was an accountant, and he put together the first set of books or the first set of financial records that we use with a bank. I went to a friend, not somebody I had to pay, a friend. But you need a team of people who work with you. And I just like to throw that out to say, Jimmy and Scott, if y'all could jump in on a team.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add to one of the last clients, the last caller's question. In instances where you have an existing EIDL loan, we can include existing loans in this PPP. In some instances, there are $10,000 is being included in this almost as like a refi included. But that again, that's as if you don't want to apply for both of them at the same time.
Okay. Jimmy?
Yes. So one of the things in that team is, you know, earlier I made a comment of forcing people to work. Well, no one's forced to work. You know, we've got a good team. So if I've said anything to, you know, make anybody seem they got to come to work, that was a slip of the tongue. But the teamwork is that when I make a decision, I bring that whole panel of team people to my office and we sit down and talk about what's the best next move for the company. So if we've got everything closed down, I'll bring the team in and say, what do we do to make the next move for business for the future of Class Act? And I'll bring in an accountant, I'll bring in the attorneys, I'll bring in some financial advisors, some people who could make some decisions for us that we might not have been thinking about.
So I've worked, as Jimmy mentioned, since 1991, kind of the day that we opened the doors. And I just look at myself as part of his team as an extension. So Bishop, just as you described, that relationship has to be more than simply business. You got to get to know those professionals that work with you, because there are going to be times that they need to understand how you think to provide you good advice, right? You know, you got to know how people's fear of risk, how to mitigate that, and how to walk them through it. But that all comes based on having those relationships and being part of the greater team and knowing the other people on the team. So I do talk to Jimmy's accountant on a regular basis, Nicole Harrell. And when I need something, she gets it to me. When she needs something, I get it to her, or we go to Jimmy and we make it work. So it is important. His insurance agency, we're all working together to benefit Class Act on a regular basis.
But one of the things, Bishop, I'll make a comment is you can't be thin-skinned. So if you're getting advice from people and you're not a good listener or you just can't take it, then you're probably in the wrong business, because sometimes people who give you advice are looking out for your best interest.
All right. Rhonda, can you jump in right there? Because a lot of times you are that whole team for somebody who's coming. Can you talk about the kinds of questions you have to ask and the kinds of questions the folk here who are going to be looking at doing something now and who are bristling under what they're kind of questions they got to be ready to hear?
Well, like Scott said, a lot of the time, the issue that I have when talking to people is their limited ability to take risk. The only way that you're going to make money is if you're not scared to lose any. So you have to go out, you've got to try new things and allow people who have been in business longer than you to give you solid advice that they know that will work. For example, I had a lash tech come into me and she wanted to open up her own lash studio. She was making maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a week mobile, but she wanted to take on $3,000 a month in rent. Now, I can't, because people are finicky, I could go to a different lash person next week if I didn't like her. We don't know the consistency of your business yet for you to go into brick and mortar. Got a complete attitude with me because she didn't trust my word, but I've been in business a lot longer. I wasn't trying to be offensive, but sometimes you do have to depend on wise counsel. That's what I would say about that.
That is very important. You have to, this is a season, and I'm inviting everybody who's on this call, on this Zoom, to understand this is a season for real active listening. It's not listening for what you want to hear. It's listening for what you need to hear in order to go forward. And you have to listen to connect. Joshua.
Bishop, what would you suggest for some of our business owners that are on today that are trying to figure out their next move? Where should they start for those who have not yet built a team? What should be their first step?
First step with building a team, I would say, is get somebody to help you with your numbers, your finances. To get somebody who can let you know if money is running out the door, if money is coming in the door, and also to help you understand what business you in. Let me jump to my other team members for that too. Who wants to jump in?
Bishop, can I say something really
Go ahead,
quick?
Rhonda.
Even with these loan applications, in November, I did a workshop for small businesses to help them get organized. As a millennial, I would like to think I'm old now, but as a millennial, when we start businesses, we start them with our heart. We don't start them with our mind. We're not really going through all of the correct logistics. So now when we want to go talk to Sandra about getting a loan or applying for any of the products, we don't have profit and losses. We don't have tax returns. We don't have the payroll forms because we've been paying people out of Cash App or things that don't even make sense. That type of structure is necessary if you're going to call yourself a legitimate business. When we're doing business credit, we base the age of the business off of when the business bank account started. So if your only means of accepting money from a client is PayPal or Cash App, we don't even know how to take you seriously in bank land.
So you understand the word business means your first stop is somebody who's doing business. Your first stop for help is somebody doing business. And you don't have to go to the biggest and the most expensive. You can start with I'm telling you, I started with my high school friend, my college friend who graduated with a degree in accounting and was the head usher in my wedding. He put together and helped me get together a business package for the church, starting out with a business plan. And I'm forever indebted. That's where I think we would start, Joshua. Somebody raised a question about how soon can folk expect money, because some of you have gone through payroll cycles already. You've already applied for the money and gone through payroll cycles. You're supposed to be able to get the money, and Sandra, you correct me, in 10 days. Is that correct?
That's correct.
From the time your application is accepted, you're supposed to be able to get the money in 10 days.
Approved.
Approved.
From the time the application is approved. And I can tell you from working on the front line of this and speaking with many colleagues in banking, the way the product came to us was you literally have to start dispersing tomorrow, but we don't have the rules yet. And so we received the rules 9:05 the night before we had to start dispersing. And so, banks we're not really good in operating sort of, under the theory, we're going to build the plane while we're flying it. And so what you're seeing from the institutions today is we need a little time to prepare a process, a procedure, and put our folks in place. And so what we're experiencing is people may have they went online, got the application, and they submitted it. But you're not done, because all the things we talked about I've got to get comfortable, your banker has to get comfortable with, you're really asking for 2.5 times your payroll. So once we get the payroll records and we can say, yes, that's dollar amount, then we key it in the system and you get a number immediately. So it's 10 days from that number, not 10 days from when you've downloaded an application and sent it to a bank.
Thank you. Got it, Steve? Were there any other questions, Joshua, Glenda, that came in through the chat? Eric,
so
Josh?
One question that was raised is, are we suggesting that now is not a good time to consider small residential property if you have good credit? And so that's one question that came
property,
in.
is that purchase or what? Rhonda?
That's purchase, residential.
My suggestion would be to wait. I would anticipate the mortgage for the entire environment to flip. So I think that coming in the fall, we'll see a reduction in prices of homes, which is good for first-time home buyers. It's just bad for current homeowners. So I would technically wait until the pandemic is over. Also, because the realtor themselves are essential, they can only go alone through a house that you would be interested in purchasing right now and call you on FaceTime, WhatsApp, or Zoom. You are not allowed to walk through any properties with them at this time. So if you're comfortable with that, then by all means, please proceed. But I would wait because I think you're going to get better pricing if you wait until fall.
But now let me tell the photographers, hook up with some realtors, hook up with some real estate agents, and be the one who's going in, because I go on Instagram and sometimes I'll hit certain real estate agents who have beautiful pictures there of homes. This is a season where you can become the exclusive photographer for a real estate agent who can't take the clients into the house. And so you can be getting all the pictures. But what we're saying is there are opportunities. Josh, anything else?
So Bishop, you touched on it, but I think we can elaborate a little bit more. One question that's been raised is if we can speak a little bit about diversification of income. And so for those whose primary income source may not be able to get to the shop, or they may not be able to work in that area right now, are there any suggestions from a business perspective, even accounting or banking, that they need to be aware of as they look at other options to diversify their income in this season?
Well, let me start and then I'll throw it to everybody else. I think many of us grew up in the age where everybody had a hustle. Now, back in the day, a hustle was a bad word. Now today, hustle is a good word. But many of us had fathers and mothers who had a second job. They didn't call it a second job. They just said they had to go to work, and then they had to go to their other job. And so many of us grew up with this idea, there's always something that can be done. There's always a skill I have that somebody needs. That's the mindset you start with. If you start with, I don't know what I can do, you're gonna be in trouble. You start with, there's something I can do, let me find it. Let me see what somebody else needs that I can help. And I'll give an example. Years ago, I bought a Cadillac car and it was pushing me in the payment. This was many years ago. The payment was pushing me. But you know why I bought it and why I said I'll be all right? Because I said, listen, I know this, I bought the color. I said, I got to be careful of the color. I think I bought a black or a super dark blue. Why? Because if push came to shove, I was going to go down to the funeral home and see if they needed somebody to drive. And I was going to drive my car and collect some money. That may sound crazy, but that's how you make additional money. You have to figure out, what do I have that somebody needs to purchase? And you start thinking positively about it, not negatively. And you start asking, what can I do? Because there's always a market for buyers and sellers. Somebody else want to jump in?
Bishop, this is Eric. One of the things that we teach in our connection class is how to get your hustle on, the multiple streams of income. And I believe if people start to look at the trends of what people are in their house right now. So what do people need that they can't go out and get? Right. You want to look at those things. Also, you can sell on Amazon. I mean, the smallest things will make you money on Amazon. You can do shipment from Amazon, and people will order from, you can create a website, from Amazon, they can order from you, and you can ship it from the shipment house to their home, and you made money. So those are things that you got to look at your skill set. People need resumes, writing skill, individual write resumes for them, papers. There's different ways that you can make money. It's just a matter of you taking assessment of your skill set and finding out how you can diversify your income on that.
Can I add to that, Bishop?
Yes, Rhonda.
I suggested to my makeup artist that she hold virtual classes for women who are now forced into Zoom meetings that weren't used to that lifestyle before. So she'll be hosting a class that's $25 a person. And then I also suggested to my hairstylist that she start marketing products on a YouTube channel in order to increase her reach. But also she can say, okay, now that your hair is blow dried, here's what we would do next. Because most of us, like you said in the beginning, have not touched our own hair in a long time. So she walks you through the process, and it will become a virtual appointment as well.
All of these things are possible. The Zoom, for example, all of us are on Zoom tonight. We all got dressed up, dolled up, and set up so that we would look good as you came in this room. Now imagine, you don't have time to go shop and buy all this stuff. This is a season you say, I got a good eye. I can go online and make your purchases for you. You're doing Zooms on the regular. As Rhonda said, a makeup artist, you can be an outfit stylist for somebody. Say, well, I won't make that much. When you add up all you make from all the time you spend in the place where you are, you'll be finding that I've got multiple streams. I've got money coming in, and I'm expanding and exploring what I bring to the table. Most persons who are upset, who have lost their jobs, are upset because nobody needed them anymore. Nobody needed them anymore. What I'm challenging you to do is make them need you. Make folk need you, because you bring something to the table they can't do without. And there's always a season and a place where there's something folk can't do. I promise you, people can't do without food right now. I promise you, my stomach is about to touch my back right now. People can't do without food. They want some food. Anybody got a Grubhub moving? Send it here right now. If you got a bird flying with a piece of cake, drop it at my door. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Food is a requirement. So just think to yourself, what else do people need at this time? And what is it that I can supply? What is it I have abundance? Joshua.
This is Eric. I wanted to make one other statement. You want to see how you can build your clientele. A lot of people use social media, which is great, but a lot of people don't think about virtual meetups. You can have set up a virtual meetup and invite people to your virtual meetup and have conversations, and you can find out if you listen closely, you can find out what people need. And then from there, you have your weekly conversations, meetups, and then you start to develop your ideas of what you can do to support those individuals. So that's an idea that people want to think about if you want to diversify your income.
Wow. Has this been helpful to everybody? If it is, can you just put a yes in the comment in the chat box, or let us know that this has been helpful? One closing comment I would have is to remind you, this is a season to be personal, not to be subjective and to remove yourself. This is a season to be talking to people, to be responding. When somebody does something, to send emails, to send texts, to say thank you, to stay in touch with your client base that you may not be able to see right now, to stay up close and personal. Because when we come out of this, we will be coming out of being detached, and people will be looking to hook up with those who stayed attached to them in this season. Well, anything, panelists, before we close out, or Reverend Joshua, anything you have?
Bishop, I would be remiss. One of the questions was, how can you get started with all of this, right? If you're in business, and how do you start developing a team? I work very closely with the Mayor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business. And there are a number of services: the Small Business Resource Center, the Small Business Development Centers. There are some free services that will help people at least begin to vet their ideas. The SCORE, which is the Senior Retired Officers Corps of Business Owners. So I would encourage people to look at those, to bounce your ideas off of those individuals as well. Just wanted to put that out there as an option.
And if any of you would like to work with us on setting up information spaces on our web and other stuff to build out this work that we're doing so that everybody gets more and more information and whatever, just put it in the chat, and Glenda and Eric will be able to pick it up and know how to contact you from there. Somebody else was jumping in. Okay, then. Well, listen, I've got to thank everybody who's been on today. Can those of you in the chat just thank everybody? Can you thank Diana and thank Rhonda and thank Scott and Jimmy?
Bishop was saying, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Okay.
What Bishop was saying is very important that you reach out to your clients and let them know that you're thinking about them, so that they believe that you're loyal. Loyal begets loyalty. You know, so if you're reaching out to them and you're using services like constant contact, that is very helpful. And you can find other services that are on the cheap that will help you to stay in contact with your customers as well.
Now, Eric, is our connection groups meeting now?
The multiple streams of income is not scheduled this semester, but next semester will be scheduled.
Okay.
We are, Bishop, in the process. Minister Eric Brockman and I are in the process of creating a special Zoom class of follow-up sessions for this particular group. So if you are interested and you filled in your email information, then you'll get an email from us within the next 3 to 5 days as far as next steps. We just wanted to try to get a feel from the audience of what they feel they most need help in. So at this time, if you could put in the chat box what you feel your greatest struggle is right now and what you need the greatest amount of help with, so that when we create the next Zoom call, it will be something that is impactful and bring you great value.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Glenn.
And I want to thank everybody who's come on. I see Mary Dent on. Mary's the one who teaches all of us about Medicare, how to be able to function in that. Mary, I'm glad to see you on today, along with all the rest who've come out to be a part. Reverend Joshua, thank you so very much for hosting tonight and guiding us through. And all of our panelists, you know, I just thank you all so much. Glenda and Kelly, thank you for putting things together and making this flow smoothly. This has been great. Well, we promise not to keep you longer than 90 minutes today, so we hope that it has been beneficial. Keep your questions going. You can keep writing in the chat even after we close off, because we want to make sure we minister to you. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you for the opportunity we've had tonight. Now, God, bless each person that's been on this Zoom experience. Bless all who've been in the room. And God, let us seize the moment that you have put in front of us and let us master it to your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Good night, team.
Good night, Bishop.